Sup nerds, I'm Tom. Let's talk about the Rise of Red Skull campaign expansion for Marvel Champions. But boom, let's do it. In this expansion, you get two new heroes to play as. You get Spider-Woman and Hawkeye. You also get 5 new villains to play against. You get Absorbing Man, Taskmaster, Crossbones, Zola, and Red Skull. Now, this is a campaign expansion, meaning you can play all of these villains in a campaign. You can you play against one, and then things carry over to play against the other, and then the other. I think you actually start with Crossbones, and then you go to Absorbing Man, and then Taskmaster and stuff. And there are even campaign-specific cards in this box that you only really use if you're playing the campaign. You use them either as boons or burdens or whatever to hinder you, and then some of them are there to help you. But you don't really play with those in normal play. I mean, I guess you can if you want to. I mean, it's your game. You do whatever you want. But the main focus of it is to gear yourself up so you can get better and better as you go through the campaign and fight against harder and harder villains. Which stands to reason that, maybe you really do need to build a really specific deck to work against the harder villains. Like, if you were to just play against these villains as is, right? Which you totally can do. Like, they get hard. Like, Zola and Red Skull are like the two hardest, right? They're just hard for different reasons. Red Skull has a lot of side schemes, and Zola has a lot of minions that come and attack you. So you might really want to build the deck very specifically to fight against those guys, because if you're just playing normally, you won't have those extra things that you have in the campaign to fight against Zola and Red Skull. Make sense? And there's different levels of the campaign to make them harder and stuff. You can even have it where whatever health you have when you end of a certain villain, right? If you beat them, right? Whatever your health is at, that's your health starting for the next villain that you fight against. Now, while I do want to talk about, the new stuff that comes in this expansion, I also kind of want to take this as an opportunity to sort of revisit my thoughts on Marvel Champions, because, when we first reviewed the base game, we had played it a couple of times, but now more content has come out for it, more heroes, more villains that you can play against, not even just this, but, I've played Black Widow and Thor and Captain America and all those other characters. So I've gotten to see more of the trajectory for Marvel Champions. So I kind of want to comment on that as well, which kind of leads into talking about these new heroes. Hawkeye and Spider-Woman are actually the characters that we played against in the campaign, just so that way we could test out exactly how well these guys work. And it does seem like there are a decent amount of cards built into their pre-built decks, specifically for the campaign, like things that have to do with conditions or things about minions and stuff, that I'm like, okay, well, now that I've played the campaign, I realize this guy has a lot to do with conditions, and this guy really has a lot to do with minions. It sort of makes sense that things are set up this way. There are also cards in these two heroes starting decks that kind of work together a little bit, like, let's say Spider-Woman has some cards that say, hey, you get to stun and confuse the villain. And then Hawkeye also has some cards that'll say, stun the villain and deal 3 damage to it, but actually deal 5 damage to it if the villain is already stunned, things like that. That it's not necessarily like in the they have Ant-Man and Wasp, and they have Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch that specifically work together really well. These cards just happen to have cards that gel well together in their starting decks. Basically, when you bust out right out of this box, you could play this box without really needing to modify things too much. Now, I did modify things a little bit. We did look through the decks and take out a couple of cards that were like, I don't really like these. We'll add in some other cards. That is probably going to lead into my biggest complaint that I still have with Marvel Champions that has not yet really been fixed. One of the main complaints I had when we were talking about the base game is the deck building aspect. Like, I really love building decks for specific games, particularly Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, I still think I like Lord of the Rings card game a little bit better than Marvel Champions. They're very similar. Same thing with Arkham Horror. I might like this better than Arkham Horror just because I haven't played Arkham Horror as much, but also that one is more specifically campaign. It's way more incentivizing you to play a campaign than it is to play individual scenarios, really, in Arkham Horror. And here, even this is sold off as being an option, and I like the idea of just being able to, I like the idea of being able to do both, but I'm more likely going to do individual games, let's just play against Kang, or let's just play against the Balrog, versus let's play the entire Lord of the Rings saga. Again, I'm glad that exists and you can do that, but given those options, I'm more often going to just play individual scenarios. But so I love building decks for individual scenarios, and I love looking at different cards and saying, oh, these would gel really well together. Ooh, that's a really unique type of deck. I would love to build, around that archetype. But the way that this game is being released, specifically with like the hero decks, right? Like the fact that they have that starter deck already in the box there. And again, like I said, you can customize it, but only a little bit, because the main thing is you're going to get the hero deck. You get the hero itself plus their 15 card deck that's unchangeable. And then you can only pick one aspect. Now Spider-Woman here is really cool because you can pick 2 aspects. It's still a little bit restrictive that you have to have the exact same number of cards for each aspect. Okay, that's fine. I bet you this is a card that this is a hero that people are going to use kind of a lot, just because it's going to be more fun to see those cards mixed together. Especially because, like, I think Doctor Strange, at the time of this recording, is like one of the only ones that came with a protection deck, right? Because protection is just not that sexy. People don't love that, You really want an aggression deck, or leadership is also fun. Justice is really necessary. Protection is good, but it's not really necessary. I've got leadership, and Spider-Woman has aggression and justice. Those are the 3 aspects that are most important. And protection is good to have if you have it, but it's not necessary to win a game. That is still my main complaint with Marvel Champions and with this expansion. This expansion doesn't change that complaint at all. Like, Hawkeye here comes up with all these arrows. Like, you want to get his quiver out so you can dig for arrows in your deck, and you want to get his bow out so you can actually play the arrows, and there are some cards that will let you generate resources for arrows, but arrows are basically just events. And now decks that are centered around playing events aren't my favorite, because, it's just do this, do whatever the card says, right? But I mean, it's still a cool archetype, it's fine, I will play a deck like that, that's okay. But you're kind of limited to the amount of arrows here. And because most of the arrows are in Hawkeye's deck specifically, I can't take those out. Like, okay, there are a lot of his arrows do damage, but there are some, I think there's 2 that do, that remove threat, right? Cable arrow. Yeah, are there 2? I think there's a lot of 2s in here. Hang on, let me find out. Yeah, there's 2 copies of every arrow. 2 vibranium arrows, 2 explosive arrows, 2 sonic arrows, and 2 cable arrows. Now, when I'm building a deck, I will sometimes put 1 copy of a card or 2 copies of a card in there, but generally, if a card's really good, I'm going to put the max number of copies, which in an LCG is generally 3. Like, even in Magic, it's 4. Like, you're going to want to, pick a card that's really good and build your, around that, or a couple of cards that are really good. Well, then you're going to stack your deck with 3 copies, or whatever the max is. But there's so many of these decks, of the starter decks, the actual cards that you can't replace, have 2 copies of a certain deck. And it just feels like, I mean, I guess they're trying to go be more versatile, right? So you get more cards in there, right? And it's like, it just feels limiting and it feels watered down. Like, I would really like to have 1 more vibranium arrow. Vibranium arrows are great. Or 1 more explosive arrow. Or whatever. And I would be willing to swap out cable arrow for that purpose if I'm building a deck where I'm going to be dealing a lot of damage, and the other player I'm playing with is going to be dealing a lot of threat reduction. Perfect, that works, right? Now, I'm saying that they have not yet really fixed this problem that I have with it, but maybe they will. Maybe later on there will be more arrows, like arrows in an aggression deck, or, like just neutral arrows or something. Or there will be another version of Hawkeye, and you're able to swap out arrows from 2 different decks, or whatever. I don't know, but as it's going right now, if they continue just down this path, yeah, I'll probably still play it, because I like the game. It is good. But it will never be as good as Lord of the Rings, to me, because I won't be able to make decks as fun as it is in Lord of the Rings. It's just, it's still my biggest complaint. It's still, I really want to be able to customize these decks a lot more, but nope, you pretty much got to do exactly what this says. Not a lot of wiggle room. Okay, well, enough about that. I've ranted about that enough in this video here, but should you buy this expansion? So, yes, if you like campaigns, this is great. Obviously, it's not only does it have that option, but I think the campaign works really well. A lot of the cards that you get that are campaign only that help you out are really cool. Like, I got to use one where I got to draw 5 cards. So I had 10 cards in my hand, or maybe 11, because I think my starting hand was 6. And it was a pretty baller turn, There's some really cool things in here that are fun to play with the campaign, or I even kind of want to build up a deck, where I just use all the zero cost heroes, all the zero cost allies that you get in here, and all the upgrades and stuff and supports that you get here with the campaign, and just have one really baller deck, but then go up against like the most hardcore villain on hardcore mode, draw 5 cards every round for him or something like that, you know. That might actually be fun sometimes. And these heroes are really cool, you know. What I complained about deck building aside, if that doesn't matter to you, or if you don't follow the deck building rules, you just do whatever you want. You just, what are you talking about? All my decks have 3 different aspects in it. I don't follow the rules. I do whatever I want, which, you know, sometimes it's your game. Do whatever you want, man. But Spider-Woman is definitely the most interesting character in here, mainly because of the deck building where you can have 2 different aspects. That's really cool. And she grows as you play more aspect cards. And in her deck itself, right, in her 15-card Spider-Woman deck, you have cards that are Spider-Woman cards and aspect cards. And you get from each different aspect. Now, granted, I think it's 2 cards from each aspect. You have 2 Justice, 2 Aggression, 2 Leadership, and 2 Protection. You know, you can't replace those. But okay, and probably the biggest reason why you should get this, even if you don't play the campaign, is just the fact that you get 5 villains. Well, I'm not going to play the campaign, but now I have 5 more villains to choose from, so that essentially doubles the amount of villains you have. So overall, I do recommend Marvel Champions, and I recommend this expansion. I'm looking forward to the next one. The Guardians of the Galaxy one is going to be really cool. I'm also just looking forward to seeing how this game grows, and I do hope that eventually things change. That complaint that I have does change or alter in some way as the game gets bigger. I mean, even if it doesn't, I will still like the game a lot. But if that aspect gets changed and deck building gets a little bit more free later on when the card pool grows or something, or you know, rules, like things like being able to have, if there's multiple Hawkeyes, whatever fixes that problem will make it, I love this game. Not just, I really like it. If any of what I was talking about in this video sounds interesting to you, I'm going to put a purchase link to the base game and this expansion in the description box down below. Go ahead and get yourself a copy. Also, while you're down there, we're going to have a link for Game Toppers. That's this tabletop that we're filming on right here. Either way, while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, so that way you'll never be bored.